whistles are screaming in vain, and you stay on the tracks avoiding the facts. You can't blame the wreck on the train. Though, to be referees in a game that got out of control. You told our staff that, well, gee, if they had not done the ratings, they would have been howled at by Congress. But don't we expect referees to make the call? Yeah. Well, I actually think I take a different view that if you look at OFEO's reports, which we've had access to, they raised a number of issues. But moving on from that, you said the ratings business was a wonderful business. You've said that, you know, as a matter of fact, because it's a duopoly, little capital required, enormous pricing power. Turned out to be good for a short time, not necessarily, I think, the model that works best for the marketplace. But I want to return to this matter of corporate governance and accountability. You are the largest shareholder, and I realize by all accounts you were not in fact, describing you as not particularly active would probably be too aggressive. But I want to probe the responsibility of shareholders. This was a company where 50.5%, I think, of the shares are held by 5 large owners. You had this tremendous spike in revenues coming from structured products. We've heard today from, and in the course of our interviews, a lot of concern and boards of directors in monitoring companies. What responsibility to kind of look into the culture, problems that are arising, and did the board and the shareholders do what they should have done in this respect? Well, I will just say, you know, arguing with you about what the markets were saying, but I mean, this was not a big secret. This is The Economist. After the fall, shows housing prices falling like a brick. There were a lot of warnings. Even Moody's.com, Mr. Zandi's a very capable man. So I guess you're saying the magnitude of the mistake doesn't, in the end, warrant change in management, relook at the culture of the corporation. This was 2005. Yeah. All right. Let me move on and ask this. One last question, you, Mr. Buffett, and then back to both of you very quickly. We interviewed a member of the Moody's board, Nancy Newcomb, who indicated the board was not particularly involved and didn't discuss significant issues like the ratings process. There was a recent press account, I think, in the McClatchy newspapers about the disengaged nature of the board, but also said that 2 senior executives approached you with significant problems at the company. I want to talk to you both briefly about the model for credit rating agencies in the context of this marketplace. It seems to me there are, you know, the worst of many worlds here. You have an issuer pay model by its nature that creates pressure to produce credit ratings to serve the interest of the issuer, not the beneficiary of those. In fact, Charlie Munger has said, I think as you know, whose bread I eat, his song I sing. I've seen him say that a number of times. You have the duopoly with enormous pricing power. And in the end, you have also business has had a whole set of legal protections, including First Amendment protections. It seems to me like a pretty toxic brew of corporate non-responsibility here. Do you think radical surgery is necessary? For example, Mr. Buffett, do you think we ought to outlaw the issuer pay model? Do you think we ought to adopt the Franken provisions in the Senate bill, which would say that rather than issuer selecting rating agency, they should be, but also the profit motive. The profit motive is pretty powerful, both on the issuer side and in terms of your business model. Can it really be overcome? I mean, it's nice to say that it's like transparency. Everyone loves transparency, and then they also say we can
for free. There is no select for free. There is no select.
Okay, but I want to probe this because this goes to management. Now, look, this structured products division was a cash cow. I mean, this is a classic case. Sometimes if it's growing like a weed, maybe it's a weed. I mean, you went from about $100 and some million in revenue in this section to $700 million, 3% of your revenues. I mean, it became a huge part of your business to say, well, we did find out we just missed here. I mean, the miss was huge. I mean, 90% downgrade. I mean, even the dumbest kid in the class gets 10% on their exam. I mean, it seems to me that the resources were not applied to understanding these products. I mean, I happen to come from the real estate business. I asked your folks earlier today, did you actually have due diligence teams that went to the ground to places like Riverside or Bakersfield, where Mr. Thomas is from, or Sacramento, where I'm from, and take a look at the borrowers, the nature of the home markets. It doesn't seem to me you built in the capacity from a management standpoint to really do structured products well. I mean, this was a huge new industry that, yes, brought in revenue, but it doesn't seem to me from a pure management perspective, and I think this is my point, Mr. Buffett, it wasn't just a mistake, that the resources to understand this were put in place. We've spent countless hours here trying to understand the modeling, and the truth is, if you look at the modeling, data was put in that was relatively, frankly, incomplete, inadequate. There was a lot of human judgments, but there wasn't a lot of ground-level due diligence. In fact, none other than visits to originators. So isn't that a significant management failure to not have built in the capacity? Might you have missed this less had you been truly on top of this in terms of understanding the products?
No, they have not.
No, they didn't do it. They didn't have fraud detection. Underwriting standards went to hell in a handbasket. Mr. Buffett, any observations on whether this was just a pure modeling mistake or whether, in fact, it was also a lack of attention in terms of the depth of due diligence? I mean, can I say something? You're a big advocate. Let me just kind of, you're a big advocate. Do your own due diligence.
Absolutely.
So here you have an entity that's a surrogate due diligence provider in a sense. And, you know, even whether people fully rely, having looked at real estate investments, you can ask the third party. But if you're going to outsource due diligence, you would hope your due diligence entity would be doing due diligence. Shouldn't rating agencies, shouldn't they have done actually ground level due diligence? Sipping those blizzards at a Dairy Queen rather than just looking at the revenues.
They really
decline in house prices because of the big drops in places. And, you know, there is that old line. I mean, you know, one rotten apple can spoil the bunch. I mean, this was an instance where half the apples may have been rotten. I mean, the correlation assumptions, I think, were not very well defined or thought out. Right. All right. I've asked you plenty for right now. Let's move on to the Vice Chairman. Thank you very much.